Greetings, all. This is Rick Levine with your December astrological forecast. As you can see from the jungle out there, I am recording this from the southern end of Goa in India, where I am about halfway through my annual astrological retreat that I am leading here called Initiation into Astrology. We have about 25 students. It's been an amazing event so far. And I'm only mentioning this because it's chances are that I may get interrupted by someone coming by. I'm recording outside, or having to relight some incense. I think you can see the smoke coming up a little bit to help keep some of the mosquitoes away. But all in all, it's just an absolutely gorgeous place and a gorgeous day. A little bit cooler today. I think it's only about 88 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe 29 degrees Celsius. But it's been very magical. So, getting right into the December stuff, I want to begin, of course, with announcing this month's free chart reading. These are mini readings that focus on harmonic aspects, but and this comes from the email list that if you're not on, you can sign up for at ricklevineastrologer.com, and the link is below with all the other clickable links in the first pinned comment below here on YouTube. And also, if this is your first time, welcome, and please don't forget to subscribe and or share this with your friends. It helps astrology and it helps me. So thank you for that. This month's free chart reading winner is Linda Curtin, and she is number 8664 in our astrological email list. Linda will receive an email from either myself or my assistant Gail, who actually does the selection of these random readings each month. And congratulations, Linda. And we will be talking to you online soon enough. Before I jump into the actual forecast itself, I would like to share a few upcoming events. The list is not very long right now. And for those of you who are totally disinterested in this, click ahead. There are links below to where the actual forecast starts. And on top of that, it normally takes a few days to get these up in their detail, but there is a way that you can link to each individual day throughout the month. And feel free to use those links down below. Again, in the first comment that's actually in the description at the bottom of the description is where you'll find that. So, upcoming events. First of all, a quick announcement about my monthly astrology night at Soul Food Coffee House. I am in India and then I will be in the UK. I won't be back in the USA until the first Friday of February. That'll be Friday evening, February 6th at 6:30 p.m. And if you're in the neighborhood, plan on stopping by. And if not, these will be live streamed and will also be available online. Secondly, I will be teaching once again my Introduction to Harmonic Aspects class. This is a 5-week class through Kepler College. I think this is the 4th time we've offered this same class. And this will be starting on January 18th. It's Sunday afternoon or Sunday noon, and that's noon Pacific time. And if you can't attend the events live, the actual class meetings in Zoom, you can watch them at your leisure. In fact, you'll have lifetime access to the classes themselves. And each class is about 2 hours. And this particular class basically revisits the evolution of use of aspects in astrology, and then presents the newer use of harmonic aspects in a very practical and usable framework. If you've never done any work with harmonic aspects, including quintiles and septiles and noviles, this course is an absolute mind opener. You'll wonder how you did without these aspects once you begin to look at them in your own chart and in the charts of your clients. That is beginning on January 18th. obviously 2026, and there is discounted advanced pricing until January 4th. The next event that I'd like to share with you is a 6-day journey into astrology, but using your own individual birth natal chart. And this is going to be offered from February 27th through March 5th. And this is going to be in Buellton, California. Some of you attended my weekend workshop there last year. This is just north of Santa Barbara, which is, of course, just north of Los Angeles. And the facility, the venue is absolutely magical. And we're going to be doing a 6-day workshop on actually making sense of natal horoscopes. As many of you know, I love the philosophy, I love the history, I love the etymology of astrological concepts and words, but this is going to be a step-by-step planet signs, houses, aspects, how to read a birth chart course. And it's going to be an immersion course that can make things come alive in a way that you may not be able to imagine. So if you are new to astrology or a beginner or have been reading your own horoscope or looking at charts online, and you want to kind of make the actual act of interpretation deeper and wider, take it to the next step so that when you look at a chart, you actually know what to do with it. This is for you. The link is also down below. This is being sponsored by Heaven and Earth Workshops, the same people who sponsor my India workshops and produce them. There'll be refreshments every day. We'll be doing some movement and some astrodrama, but mostly this will be hands-on chart interpretation with handouts using your own charts as the curriculum. That is February 27th through March 5th. And then from March 20th to March 30th, I will be teaching at the Mystery School at Sea, and that is mysteryschoolatsea.com. This is a 10-day cruise through the Aegean Sea, Greek islands such as Naphtalo, Heraklion, Rhodes, Kavala, Thessaloniki, Ephesus in Turkey, visiting sacred sites, and guided explorations, activations, planetary work. And I will be doing 3 lectures on this cruise, and those lectures are detailed at the site mysteryschoolatsea.com, Mystery School at Sea, all one word. And I will also be seeing clients on this lecture. So this could be your chance to get a reading. As many of you know, I am not doing many readings these days. I'm quite backed up, and many of you have been on my waiting list for too long. And for that, I apologize. But this would also be a chance to actually have an individual consultation. That is mysteryschoolatsea.com. Then in London on May 15th through 18th, I will be at Shifts Happen 2. Shifts Happen 1 was last May, and this is a conference that I participated in with Steve Judd. Alex Trenoweth will be also lecturing at this, along with Darby Costello. And so if you want more information on this, let me know. Information has not been published yet, but if you want to be on an advanced notification list, just send me an email, but at least put it in your calendar, London, May 15th through the 18th. And then I'll be hopping on an airplane heading back home to Seattle for NORWAC. This will be my 34th NORWAC, I think. And NORWAC is always the last weekend in May, a Memorial Day weekend in the United States, May 21st through the 25th. And actually, this is my 35th NORWAC, because my first one was in 1990. I'll be doing the opening keynote talk on the future of astrology there, and then I'll be doing a post-conference workshop on working with yods, iron yods, golden yods, and yods of fate. And if you are interested in yods, sometimes known as finger of God, the finger of God, this workshop takes this to the next level and really opens up our perception and our understanding of yods. And if you're thinking about going to NORWAC, That's norwac.net. But make sure that you go there and take a look at it and make a decision fairly quickly because Norwalk always, at least for the past several years, sells out. And so if you wait until March of next year to decide if you want to go, your luck will be out and you most likely will not be able to go. And then, of course, I'm just going to mention here quickly in passing that there will be an Astrology Week conference at the end of August, 2026 at Lilydale, which is, as some of you may know, the home of the American Spiritualist Church. And this is a magical, beautiful place, and I'll have more information on that. And then just a couple of weeks later, UAC, the United Astrology Conference, will be September 3rd through the 9th. The title of this conference this year is Daring to Dream, and it's going to be a major astrological event. So that's it. That's my upcoming schedule. I hope to see some of you, many of you, at some of these events, and I'm looking forward to them. And with that, I'm going to shift gears and talk about what's going on in the month of December. And December is another interesting month, but quite frankly, it doesn't quite have the power of the punch. It doesn't pack as much energy as some of the recent months that we've experienced, and also some of the upcoming months. Nevertheless, it's still quite an important month because we have the continuation of planets turning direct. Remember, we had all the outer planets moving retrograde, and it felt like we weren't making any progress, but there's certainly been a lot of noise, a lot of things going on in current events, politics all over the globe, well, it doesn't matter. I was going to start listing countries, but it just seems that we are being impacted by these astrological transitions that may be the singularly greatest astrological shifts that we will experience in our lifetime. As you know, Pluto has moved from Earth Capricorn into Air Aquarius. We have both Neptune and Saturn having moved through Pisces, and both of them have tipped into Aries, and now retrograded back into Pisces, but they will turn direct and move into Aries, where they will make their first conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries that we moderners have ever not only seen in our lifetimes, but ever measured going back thousands of years. And this is going to be an important event or an important transition that we're already well into. We can feel what's going on from this, and I will talk about this. I've been talking about it for months, as Saturn, the planet of what we like to call reality, is joining with Neptune, the planet that we like to call the planet of illusion. But the real question is which is real and which is illusion. And that aspect came very, very close over the last couple of months. And now, as Neptune retrograded and Saturn has now turned direct, and the gap will begin to close on this at the beginning of the month. The Saturn Neptune orb from their exact conjunction, the Saturn Neptune orb is a little over 4 degrees. And by the end of February, of 2026, that will be exact. So we're going to feel this push of what is real, what is fake reality, what is fake news. How do our dreams and our illusions and our fantasies and our ideals impact the real world if we use Saturn to manifest those dreams? That's Neptune. And so this is an important piece of the larger shift going on. And as Saturn and Neptune join up in Aries and get closer through December and January, there's this sense of it not just being a new cycle, but it being at the most progenerative point in the zodiac where the entire cycle of astrology begins every year with the sun shift into Aries. But any planet moving into Aries is beginning its cycle through the zodiac. And of course, this cycle is not happening in a vacuum because at the same time, Saturn and Neptune are sextiling Pluto from one side. Remember, Pluto having just moved into Aquarius. I say just, it tipped into Aquarius back in March of 2020. 2023 and kind of has been going direct retrograde, and now direct, and it will not go back into Capricorn for another couple hundred years. But for the next 15 years or so, it will be in futuristic Aquarius. And of course, the other important thing is that that Pluto is being trined by Uranus. And that aspect also became very, very close until Uranus now has turned retrograde and has backed into Taurus. The aspect was almost perfected, and this aspect, this Uranus-Pluto trine, perfects next mid-July. And I've been talking about the chart of next mid-July for quite a while, because this is, I believe, the real point of no return. That will tell us the lay of the land for years to come, I believe, and that will be the beginning of maybe the largest transition that humanity has ever been through. And for those of you who know my work, I'm often minimalizing transitions and transits that other astrologers are saying, this is the biggest thing ever, this is the most important thing ever, this has never happened before. Well, this one is that. It's never happened before. And anyone who says they know what's going to happen during this transit doesn't, because this is new territory, as Uranus makes that first exact trine with Pluto in July, but then makes 5 more exact trines between the summer of 2026 and the spring of 2028. It moves in and out and in and out and in again through that trine, while Neptune at the midpoint is sextiling both of them from both sides. And of course, Uranus and Pluto, that cycle is really the cycle that began at the Uranus-Pluto conjunction in the mid-1960s. Most astrologers recognize the fact that the Uranus Pluto conjunction in Virgo that really defined the 60s was the seed that was planted for much of what's going on now. And that their square through the 2010s, but exact 2012 through 2015, was really a revisitation to those things that came into awareness or consciousness. Pluto, the underworld, Pluto, the bacchanalian energy, Pluto, the unconscious, Pluto, evolutionary transformation, Uranus, revolutionary, Uranus, breakthrough, sudden, lightning, new awareness. And whether it was the use of psychedelics and substances that altered our consciousness, or whether it was a next round of gender equilibrating. I don't know what that right word would be there. With the Ms. Magazine and the rise of feminism, or the next wave of feminism. In the mid-60s, with civil rights and the passage of the Civil Rights Amendment in the United States, the whole view of ecology and shifts in medicine towards practices that include either Ayurvedic medicine or natural medicines or yoga and meditation, that all of these things that were seeded, and certainly rebellion or reaction, that would be the Uranus piece, against the power structure, that would be the Pluto piece. All of these things that began in the mid-60s were back upon us, even though they never went away completely. They kind of slipped off out of our radar for many people. And in the 2010s, particularly when this square went exact on and off 5 times during that period of time from 2012 to 2015, we had the Arab Spring, in the Arab movement. We had in the United States, Occupy Wall Street. We had social revolutions occurring all over the planet, including in Indonesia, and many other places. We also had the revisitation of gender balancing with the legalization of gay marriage on a federal level in the United States, and also the growth of the LGBTQIA plus movement that it kind of has kicked in an era of, let's say, gender fluidity, for lack of a single better word. And also during this time, we had another round of social unrest, not only around the world, but also particularly related to civil rights, issues of boundaries and boundary definition with immigration, and becoming a large part of this. And of course, the use of first legalization of medical marijuana and then the use of recreational marijuana in not only most states in the United States, but in many countries around the world. This was all in that 2012 to 2015 during the Uranus-Pluto square period, where there's actual conflict. Okay, so we're in India, and the internet just went out for about a half an hour, and I record using Zoom, and there was nothing to do, and so I was in the middle of a sentence, and I'm going to pick up the best I can, and it may get dark while I'm recording, but welcome to India, where the electricity sometimes goes off for 5 or 10 minutes or an hour, and so does the internet. Anyhow. I was talking about the Uranus-Pluto trine and how this Uranus-Pluto trine is happening in a way that is really new territory because Saturn and Neptune are at the midpoint, sextiling Pluto from one side and Uranus from the other. And all of these outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are all moving from water and earth signs, moving or have moved from water and earth signs to fire and air signs. And so this is an interesting kind of a period of time that I think is setting up huge shifts in everything we know about everything cultural, social, and even our personal lives. Now, into this, and as December unfolds, uh, something begins to shift because Pluto, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, Chiron, and Eris had all been moving retrograde. Now Uranus is the only one of that group is left retrograde. Jupiter has turned retrograde, but all the other planets have either turned direct or are ready to turn direct. In fact, it is Neptune that will make the change from retrograde to direct, and that will happen on December 10th. And so by the middle of December, we will see forward movement occurring from Pluto, the outermost of the normal planets, Neptune, um, Saturn, and those three planets will now all be moving direct. Of course, Mercury was retrograde at the beginning of December. It is moving direct and is beginning to gain some speed. And of course, Jupiter has just turned retrograde back in November. The intriguing thing about all of this is because Jupiter has recently changed motion from direct to retrograde, it's retrograding, but not moving very fast. Saturn moving direct is not moving very fast. And Neptune, which is retrograde, never really moves very fast. So we have this ongoing trine between Jupiter and the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which right now is, like I said earlier, about 4 degrees of orb. But this is at about Saturn and Neptune are at about 25 and 29 degrees at the end of Pisces. Jupiter at the beginning of the month is at 24 degrees of Cancer. And through that point of, let's say, 20 to 20 degrees of Cancer through maybe 1 degree of Sagittarius, we've had recently Mars, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury move direct through that, then Mercury retrograde, and now Mercury moving direct. And what that means is that we've had this holding pattern on this grand water trine, which has been with us since October. And by the middle of December, this trine begins to fade as direct Mercury moves through that last point in the end of Scorpio, moving into Sagittarius. The moon comes through for a very quick blip, and I want to actually show this animation be so that you can actually see how this grand water trine, which is kind of a self-sufficient emotional state, regardless of what's going on out there. And there's a lot of awful and complicated things going on out there, but there's something here that is giving us a sense of hope, of vision, of a potential where we may get around this crazy bend where we seem to be. And I want to actually play this animation. And this animation begins back toward the end of October. And you can see as it unfolds, there's this grand trine that is holding with the various planets, Mercury and Mars, making the trine to Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter. Then they move out of the picture, but then the sun comes into the picture and kind of fills in that trine again. Mercury turns retrograde, Venus is moving direct, the moon swings around through that period, through that same point. And here we are at the beginning of December, and that trine is still holding. And it's not until around the 15th that it fades, and then the moon pops in for a last boom, and then it goes away. And so I think that December, by the time we get to the middle of December, one of the things that's been holding it together and holding us together begins to fade away. And I think that it's not that it necessarily becomes more difficult, but I do think that we may go back to realizing that whatever gains we thought we were going to be making are still going to take time for them to unfold. Just an interesting aside. Another thing that's of interest is that all month the inner planets are all clustered fairly close together, which means that there's no aspects between Mercury, Venus, and Mars and the Sun. All of the aspects that even these faster moving planets make are all aspects to the outer planets, Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, Eris, Uranus, and Jupiter. And it's an interesting thing. I think things begin to shift more into the global level of awareness through the month of December. So here we are at the chart for December 1st. And on December 1st, we can see that that water grand trine is still active, with Mercury now moving direct, the last of the planets to move through that 20 to 29 degree Scorpio, even to 2 degrees of Sagittarius. And we'll watch that Mercury as it moves direct through the first half of the month, gaining speed, and it will make exact trines to Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune as we move on. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that on the 1st of December, we also have, and by the way, those Mercury trines, our Mercury will trine Jupiter on December 6th. It will trine Saturn on December 7th. So that trine is very active. And then it will trine Neptune on December 11th. So all of those trines are there. In fact, even as it moves on, by the end of the month, Mercury will be making trines as it moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius. It will be making trines to both Chiron and Eris as it then moves into Sagittarius at the beginning of the new year. So the other thing that I want to look at here in reference to what's going on December 1st is that the sun is actually making a square and a half to Jupiter. Now, the square and a half, for those of you who follow my work or use more modern aspects, you know that the square and a half is every bit as potent as the square. And the sun actually is moving through a period of space where it's activating the Jupiter square Eris. And Jupiter square Eris is like within a quarter of a degree. Chiron and Eris have been fairly closely conjunct for quite a while. And in fact, they were exactly conjunct back in the end of May of 25. And then on the retrograde side, they were exact conjunct again at the beginning of October. And they'll be conjoined the third and final time at 24 degrees 59 minutes at almost 25 degrees of Aries on March 19th of 2026. Now, this conjunction is a very slow-moving conjunction, but it really has to do with how we can stir things up. That would be Eris. In order to heal them, that would be Chiron. And over this period of time, Jupiter has been squaring the Chiron Eris conjunction, and the Jupiter square to that conjunction was actually exactly square Eris back in November, the beginning end of the end of November as it's retrograding, but it will then also square Chiron, and it will do that later this month. Jupiter will square Chiron exactly on December 21st, but then it will eventually retrograde all the way back, turn direct, and it will make the third and final square with Chiron next year in 2026. We'll have more to say that down the road. But now, as Jupiter is squaring Eris and Chiron both within orb, we have the sun making squares and a half, one and a half. That's a sesqui-square to Jupiter and to Chiron and Eris. And the sun's square and a half to Jupiter at noon on December 1st is just a few minutes of orb from being exact. And its square and a half to Chiron and Eris are about a half a degree to a little bit over a degree. So the sun to Chiron, Eris, and Jupiter is making what many astrologers call Thor's hammer or an iron yod. It looks like a yod, but the bottom of it is a square. It's more difficult. It's more proactive. It makes things happen. And in some ways, here it's the vision of the future that is really becoming highlighted in all of this. I think it's a very important aspect. And in fact, I think that it is a very important day, all in all, because of this combination of energies here on the first. We also have here on the first, we have Venus coming into a sextile, and Venus is coming into a sextile with Pluto is really deepening our feelings. That's not exact until just, maybe a little bit after 1 a.m. tomorrow morning. And when I say tomorrow, I'm always referring to the date of the chart. We're looking at the chart for December 1st. And by the way, even though I'm in India, all times I'm giving are Pacific Standard Time. That's 8 hours off of Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Time. Regardless of where I am on the planet, I always use the chart for or the timing of the events for West Coast of the United States. But we'll move this chart ahead to the second, and we can see now that Venus is making that sextile exact with Pluto. And by the way, as an aside, we also have Neptune making a sextile, Uranus making a sextile with Neptune. That's within a half a degree of orb. And that's part of this whole picture of support, even as the Pluto trine with Uranus is almost 3 degrees of orb. We're getting a lot of energy off of those planets, but at the same time, we still have that water grand trine that is really reminding us that our internal feelings and how we frame things are ultimately what's important. On Wednesday, December 3rd, the moon actually will move into Gemini, out of Taurus into Gemini at 6:47 p.m., and that is Pacific time. It will also, in the process of doing that, it will also line up with Uranus, and the moon's conjunction with Uranus occurs at about 5 p.m. And so that may stir up some energy a bit We still have Uranus opposing the planets at the end of Scorpio and the beginning of Sagittarius. It's not an exact opposition, but if we, for example, took the midpoint between the Sun and Mercury, that would be closely related to the opposition to Mercury. So there's still the opposition to Uranus. And so there's still things that are being stirred up. It's complicated out there, and there are things that are breaking through. And I'm being buzzed with mosquitoes now, and so I'm waving them away. Um, that is on that is on the third. By the time we get to the fourth, we can see that the moon in Gemini is now opposing the sun, actually just coming into the opposition to the sun, which of course is a full moon. And if we move this chart ahead to 3:13 p.m., we normally are looking at a noon chart. If we move this chart ahead a few hours to 3:13, we can see that the moon will be a full moon at 13 degrees of Gemini and 13 degrees of Gemini and 4 minutes. And that is an interesting full moon. The moon itself in Gemini opposing the sun in Sagittarius. And one of the interesting things about this is how closely square this is to the lunar nodes, the bendings of the nodes. And so this full moon becomes an opportunity to make something happen. But remember, full moons are really more culminations than they are beginnings of something new. And we also have another interesting pattern here, and that is that Mercury is making a quincunx with Chiron. This is about communication, Mercury, to Chiron, how we heal or something that brings out wounds, and this is a communication. And with a quincunx, it doesn't quite feel right. It doesn't quite fit together. And the interesting thing about this is that Mercury at 22 of Scorpio is making a half a sextile, a semi-sextile to Mars. And what that means is that if we take a pattern from Mercury to Mars down to the Chiron Eris conjunction and then over to Jupiter, we have what looks like a trapezoid or almost like a finger of God, but there's no point at the top. Instead, it's a rounded plateau. And I think when we combine all of these energies together, we find that there is something that is disruptive, uncomfortable, even though we still have that grand water trine cooking behind everything. It's not as comfortable as we might want it to be. And so this on this full moon on the fourth, I think we have to be careful about what it is we're saying, because we can say something that we have good intentions around, but it doesn't quite carry through, especially as the moon makes its square with the nodes, followed by the sun. That's exact actually tomorrow morning. Let's move the chart ahead to the 5th. Now, here on the 5th, we have a couple of important things happening. And one is that we have Mars making a trine with Chiron. This may smooth over some of the things that happened yesterday. And in fact, we're coming into that watery grand trine that's perfecting a bit more as Mercury moves towards its trine with Jupiter. That's exact tomorrow on the 6th. We're looking at the chart now for the 5th. And here on Friday the 5th, we can see also that the moon at the end of Gemini is coming into its movement into Cancer, which happens at 5:54 p.m. today on Friday the 5th. And so as we move the chart ahead now again to the 6th, this is Saturday the 6th, we can see now that Mercury is making its exact trine to Jupiter and coming into its exact trine to Saturn tomorrow on the 7th. And so we can imagine a couple of days of optimism, a couple of days of maybe things are turning out, better than we thought. But of course, the overconfidence of a Jupiter trine, whether it's to Mercury, whether it's Mercury to Jupiter, and or the trine to Mercury to Saturn, is that we can become overconfident, and then we have to pull our energy in a bit and ground. And this on the 6th, I think, becomes part of something that we really have to protect our own space. Remember, the moon is in Cancer now, and the moon in Cancer really likes to feel its own safety and security. We also now have Venus having moved into the place where the sun was, but Venus is now making a square and a half with Chiron. And over the days ahead, it will make a square and a half with Jupiter. Actually, that will be exact tomorrow. And so we have this ongoing dance with this kind of movable iron yod or Thor's hammer, but it's still the Sagittarius energy that's kind of the problem, the bugaboo. It's we can get too far out with Venus and the Sun and Mars all in Sagittarius, especially as Mercury is trining Jupiter, which of course is also very close all month in its trine to Saturn. Remember that Saturn trine is only 1 degree of orb now. It is separating. It came within minutes of arc over the last couple of months, but it won't be exact until next year. And yet there is a little bit of balance feeding into this whole thing about how much forward do we go, how much do we expand, how much do we pull back. That's all on December 6th. As we move to the 7th, we're now on Sunday, the 7th, and here Mars comes into its quincunx with Jupiter from the other side. And now again, we have this kind of annoying thing of how much energy should we put into something? How much is enough? How much is too much? The Jupiter-Saturn trine is giving us a sense of balance, but it's still easy to get carried away with that Mars and Sagittarius, looking at the big picture and wanting to take everything as far as it can. And of course, we also now have Mercury making its exact trine with Saturn. We're getting a little bit more serious. We're trying to pull the energy in, and yet it's not easy to do with Venus at that point that is sesqui-square to Jupiter on one side, and to Eris on the other side. That's all on the 7th. These are not easy days. In fact, by midday, the moon going over Jupiter is highlighting that grand water trine. But it also can encourage us too much, too far, too fast. We have to pay attention and pull energy in, or we might find ourselves in trouble. That is all on the 7th. Incidentally, the moon moves into Leo at just before 7 p.m. tonight on the 7th. That's on Sunday the 7th. It actually is at 6:48 p.m. when the moon moves into Leo, and we may find our energy moving outward a bit more. Here on Monday the 8th, Venus is still at that point of that Thor's hammer or iron yod. And today it makes the other half of that aspect exact, where Venus makes an exact square and a half, a sesqui-square to Eris. Yesterday on the 7th, it did it to Jupiter. And this is still a tough energy, even though Venus is giving us an idea of what we like or what we want in the future. It may not be happening that way, especially as the sun moves into a half square with Pluto, indicating some power struggle, something coming up that was hidden before, kind of an interaction that there's no easy winner on, and we may find ourselves up against a force that is larger than life. We may need to pull back now, especially because today, later in the day, it's exact at 4:15 p.m. Mars makes a square with Saturn, and this is the ultimate conflict between Mars and Saturn, Mars the planet of hot, Saturn the planet of cold, Mars the planet of gas pedal, accelerate, Saturn the planet of the brake pedal, hold back. And it's hard to know really how to work that gas and brake. It's easy to go too fast and have to slam on the brake, or pull back too much and then really have to give it some gas in order to move off of dead center. And all of this is complicated by the fact that Neptune is slowing down, ready to move direct. It doesn't do that exactly until the 10th. As we move through the 9th, we can see the moon moving through Leo. There's no other exact aspects today, but that Mars-Saturn square is still operative. It's still frustrating because we can't quite figure out how to gauge a speed that works. We also have Mercury now coming into its trine with Neptune and into its opposition with Uranus. These are aspects that Mercury has already done when it went retrograde and then direct. We may feel on familiar ground here, but there's a chance here for a major breakthrough if we can keep our ideals, that would be Neptune, our imagination, that would be Neptune. If we have integrity around them, then saying what needs to be said as Mercury moves into that opposition, and that is exact on the 10th. Let's move ahead to the 10th, and we can now see Mercury is exactly, or at least partile, 28 degrees. Well, actually at noon, it's not only partile, meaning same degree, 28 degrees Scorpio, opposing Uranus at 28 degrees of Taurus, but they're also at the same number of minutes. This is exact, and this again is lightning striking, saying something, you can't take it back. Just because you think it doesn't mean you should say it. On the other hand, this is a good day, again, as long as we keep that Neptune in check, because Mercury is moving towards its trine with Neptune. If we speak our dreams and we keep them in perspective, if we can tell the difference between what truth is and what illusion is, we will make this work. That Mercury is exactly trine Neptune tomorrow on the 11th. But today here on the 10th, we also can see that at noon, the moon is in Virgo, and it actually did that late last night at 11:20 p.m. On Tuesday the 9th. The moon moved into Virgo. And we'll now move this ahead. Here we have in the 10th, the moon is in Virgo. We're feeling a bit more analytical, a bit more precise. We may be asking more questions. We're thinking about what makes things effective and efficient, even though that Mercury may be screaming to say what's on its mind and do it in a way that may not be exactly honest or tied to reality as it moves into that trine with Neptune. Then, as we get to the 11th, we're looking at Mercury making that exact trine with Neptune. That's exact at just 2:19 a.m. early in the morning. By the way, I keep waving away a mosquito here that has its eyes or its nose on me. And that Mercury trine Neptune makes it easy to tell a lie, to expand our thinking beyond what's real. It also makes it easy to be misguided or confused by what someone else says. But the other thing is that today Mercury moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius, where all of a sudden it's willing to talk about the big picture. Now, this does not hold back that. I thought I got it. I didn't. Oh, maybe I did. Um, Mercury moving into Sagittarius does not hold back Jupiter at all. Remember, we still have that Jupiter squaring the Chiron and Eris, and Jupiter is still trining Saturn. So Jupiter is still important. And now that Mercury not only trines Neptune, but it's also moving into Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's home sign, we may again become overconfident and have such a big idea and big picture thing that we kind of lose sight of the details, even though the moon is still in Virgo. And in fact, today, as the moon moves through the second part of Virgo, it will move opposite Saturn. And eventually, by tomorrow, it will move into Libra. The moon actually moves into Libra on the 12th in the morning at about 8 a.m., 8:04 a.m. exactly. And as the moon moves from Virgo to Libra, we become a bit more chill. or we become a bit more driven to find a way to make things okay, even those things that are not okay. Remember, back at the very beginning of the month on the 2nd, we had Venus as it was moving through the beginning of Sagittarius. It made a trine with Pluto. It made a sextile with Pluto, deepening our sense of what we liked and really bringing us into a realm where we weren't going to just be satisfied with what's on the surface. And now today on the 12th, it's not exact until the 13th. Let's actually move this ahead to the 13th, where we can see that now the moon is moving through mid degrees of Libra, but we also have Mercury now at 2 degrees of Sagittarius, looking at the big picture, and it's making a sextile with Pluto. And so, what we say today may have more depth, more intensity, more volatility, more perspective, more power. It may not be the easiest things that we're saying, but with that sextile, it's almost like we can get away with saying those things that we weren't able to say at some other time. We also have Mars making a quincunx with Uranus. And this is a bit of a disruptive energy. Mars Uranus to me is like the Tower card in Tarot. The lightning strikes, something happens. And with this quincunx that is exact very early in the morning, the quincunx is exact at just before 2 a.m. There's a sense of that something disruptive might happen today. And we just need to pay attention to it and do whatever damage control that we need to do. At noon on the 14th, we can see that the moon is now at 26 degrees of Libra, which means that the moon will move into Sagittarius by 8 p.m. tonight, actually at 7:51 p.m. when the moon moves into Scorpio. And that moon's entry into Scorpio intensifies and deepens our perspective, especially since Mercury is still within range of that sextile to Pluto. We're not satisfied anymore with what's on the surface. We want to speak the truth. We want to say things that stir up energy from the hidden realms, from the unconscious realms. Today's a pretty potent day. Mars also makes a square with Neptune. We may have a confrontation with something that we thought to be true and we were misled, or this could be a great day for writing poetry or journal entering or walking, in nature, because that Mars square Neptune is a bit what's the right word? It's not restrained by Saturn. We have the ability to do things that bring us into the realms of imagination. We also have the sun now moving into its position where it's going to be making trines with Chiron today and with Eris in a couple of days on the 16th. And that trine from the sun to Chiron and Eris, I think, can really help whatever the healing processes are that are going on. However, the sun is also making a quincunx with Jupiter. And so we have to be careful once again about saying too much, about doing too much, about overconfidence. Jupiter can work in our behalf, especially because it's still trining Saturn. But we have to be careful because it's square to Chiron and Eris, and its quincunx from the sun kind of create a formation of something that we need to learn. When you have a planet that is square to one planet that's trine to the next, Jupiter is square to the Chiron Eris, which in turn is trine to the sun, which goes back to a quincunx, back all the way around to Jupiter. This kind of energy signifies that there's flow and there's blockage, and we need to learn from that the best we can. Also today, later in the day, as Mars is making its square to Neptune at 29 degrees, at 29 degrees of Pisces. Mars is at 29 degrees of Sagittarius, and it shifts from Sagittarius to Capricorn just before midnight tonight on the 14th. And and Mars in Capricorn likes it there. When Mars rules, it's at home in Aries. When it's not in Aries, Capricorn is its favorite place to be. Why? Because it finishes what it starts. And I think that it's important to understand that Mars moving into Capricorn kind of takes away some of the blue sky energy that we might have had about what's going on and brings us down to the ground a bit. And also, as today on Sunday, the moon moving from Libra to Scorpio also brings us down a notch into our bodies, into the real world, into the underworld. And so I think today is another really, really powerful day. That's Sunday, December 14th, as Mars moves into Capricorn. And I think we might get a little bit, it's a sobering up day. It's a day, it's a somber day. It's a bit of seriousness that we have to contend with. That's on the 14th. On the 15th, we can see now that the moon is in Scorpio. And on the 15th, there's no other aspects that are exact. We do have the sun moving closer to its trine to Eris. That's exact just a couple of hours after midnight on the 16th. Let's move to the 16th. We can see midday that the moon is now at almost 20 degrees of Scorpio, and the moon is now running through that watery grand trine, which has kind of all but dissipated, but the moon is giving us one last kick on that grand trine energy that may stabilize our emotions. And as that moon moves through the latter degrees of Scorpio and on into Sagittarius, I think we see the last of that grand water trine. It begins to dissipate. What's also happening here on the 16th is the sun is making its exact square with Saturn. This is a bit of a reality check. Here we have to look at what's going on. We have to make it real. If we've been going too hard, too fast, we might not make it around the bend. We can go off the road. However, if we're aware of the sun square Saturn, we can know that wherever we're being limited, this is a sign of where we need to pull back, do more work, make it real. This is a very strong aspect. And I think it's especially useful because the sun is also making that trine with Eris, as I talked about earlier, just early this morning at 1:49 a.m. That is on the 16th. By the time we get to the 17th, we can see that the moon has moved into Sagittarius. The moon enters Sagittarius at 8:38 a.m. and it's heading towards the new moon because there is a new moon while the sun is still in Sagittarius just before the winter solstice. But here, we can see at noon on the 17th, with the moon at just 1 degree of Sagittarius on the 17th, we can also see that Mercury is now active at that point of what we keep referring to as Thor's hammer, as Mercury is making a square and a half with Chiron on one side and Jupiter on the other side, while Chiron and Jupiter are still pretty closely square. The Chiron Jupiter square is about 1/3 of a degree from being exact. And so this is quite a potent and powerful aspect. And again, stirs things up and motivates us into action. I think we've lost the safety and the security of that grand water trine. And I think with all the planets kind of beginning to gain speed moving ahead, except for Jupiter, which is retrograde, I think that there is some feeling like we're going somewhere, even though I don't think we really know where we're going. That is on the 17th. As we move to the 18th, the moon moving through Sagittarius now, we're feeling that blue sky again. We're moving toward a new moon here on the 18th. We have Venus making its trine with Chiron. We have Venus will make a trine with Eris on the 20th. And so once again, I think there's a sweetness to healing, but as Venus is making the trine to Chiron, it's also making a quincunx to Jupiter. This pattern keeps getting repeated again and again and again. Venus's exact quincunx to Jupiter is at 5:45 p.m. today on the 18th. And so I think that there's some real discomfort here and yet some flow. The flow is Venus is trine to Chiron. The discomfort is its quincunx to Jupiter. Let's move this ahead to the 19th. And we can see at noon, it's just prior to the new moon. The new moon today on Friday, the 19th, occurs at 5:43 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I'm going to move the chart ahead to that 5:43. And we can see that this exact conjunction between the moon and the sun occurs at just about 28.5 degrees of Sagittarius, 28 degrees and 25 minutes. And that is very closely square Neptune, coming into that square still. And it is also very closely partile quincunx Uranus. This is a potent new moon, and I think the power of this new moon is the vision that we have, is Sagittarius's idealism and the potential of where we can go. Its danger is that we can trick ourselves into believing that what we see as a possibility, our idealism, can be mistaken for reality. And I think it's the quincunx to Uranus that might lightning strike and bring us back into reality a bit. This is a really potent new moon, and I think it opens up the door to the future in a lot of ways. I'll talk more about this in the December mid-month update that will come out obviously prior to this new moon, but in mid-December. For those of you who are at the Patreon $3 a month level, that's the solar tier in Patreon. This is all December 19. And as we move to the 20th, we can see that the moon now actually moves into Capricorn. It actually does that on the 19th at 8:52 p.m. It moves into Capricorn. And as we look at the chart for the 20th, for Saturday the 20th, we can see that the moon is now in mid-Capricorn and the sun is at the last degree of Sagittarius. And in fact, it's important to note that the sun will move from Sagittarius into Capricorn tomorrow morning. We'll get to that chart in just a moment at 7:03 a.m. And that is the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. That is on December 21st. But here, still on the 20th, we now have Mercury at that square point midday at noon to the nodal axis, which really brings Mercury into a highlight. This is time to say what we need to say. Today, the sun is also squaring Neptune. That's the illusion factor. But we have today also Venus making missed it again, mosquitoes. We also have Venus making its square with Saturn. And this has to do with maybe not getting what we want, or having to work a little harder to get what we want, or maybe just gratification is delayed, or maybe even we set aside an immediate gratification for something in the moment for something longer term, because that Venus square Saturn says it may take a while to get what it is that we want. And then on the first day of the winter season in the north, the summer season in the south, on December 21st, we can see that the sun has actually moved into Capricorn. And as I mentioned before, it moves into Capricorn just after 7 a.m. at 7:03 a.m. But the other thing about the 21st is that we have an exact square between Jupiter and Chiron today. And remember, I referenced this Jupiter Chiron and Jupiter Eris square that is on and off through Jupiter's direct, retrograde, direct. I think this is another opportunity for healing, for teaching, for learning, but we have to be careful because it's Jupiter. We can become overly sure of ourselves, or we can become overly confident. We can't push it too far, or it will backfire on us. That is all on the 21st. As we move to the 22nd, we can see that the moon is now in Aquarius, and the moon actually moved into Aquarius this morning on Monday, the 22nd, and it moved into Aquarius at 7:52 a.m. And we can see here on the 22nd that at noon, the moon is at 2 degrees of Aquarius, and it is just lining up with Pluto. And this can certainly increase the volatility or the intensity of our emotions here today on the 22nd. But we also have today Venus now making that quincunx with Uranus that I mentioned yesterday. The Sun made its quincunx with Uranus back on the 19th. Now Venus is doing it, and there's that sense of something's not right and we have to break through, but the breakthrough may not be all that comfortable. That is on the 22nd. As we move to the 23rd, we can see the moon is in mid-Aquarius. There is not much else going on, particularly although Venus is moving closer to its square to Neptune, that Mars was through in the earlier part of the month, and then the Sun was through just before it changed signs. But now we have Venus moving toward that. That's actually on the 23rd, late in the evening, that Venus square Neptune occurs at 9:31 p.m. And this can be a bit confusing. It can also be a bit romantic and yummy. We have to be careful, though, about what is real and what is not. And then on the 24th, we have Mercury back in the picture, and Venus even more so, because Venus moves from Sagittarius, where it's hopeful and idealistic about the future, into Capricorn, where it becomes a bit more realistic. And now we have the Sun and Venus and Mars all in Capricorn, and these are all reality checks, and these are all emphasizing Saturn. In fact, as we move to the end of the month, on the 29th, we'll have Mercury making a square to Saturn, and once again, we'll have to really bring our dreams back down to earth in order to make them real. Here on the 24th, though, we also have Mercury making a half square with Pluto. This can be a bit upsetting. This can be communication that has some volatility to it, some power struggles. And with Venus's entry into the Mercury semi-square, Pluto occurs at 5:49 a.m. Pacific time. And then Venus's shift into Capricorn occurs at 8:26 actually a.m. And again, there's some real somber, some sobriety here. And we also have during this period of time the moon moving from Aquarius into Pisces. The moon moves from Aquarius into Pisces on Wednesday, the 24th at 5:08 p.m. Here we become a bit more dreamy. Perhaps the compassion level goes up. In some ways, this is perfect timing for many people for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with that moon in dreamy and compassionate Pisces. With the caution of watch your alcohol, because Pisces and Neptune together can often be a too much dissolution of the hard edges of Saturn. But that's on the 24th and the 25th. And on the 26th, the day after Christmas, we have, let's get to that chart on the 26th. We can see that the moon is now in mid Pisces. At noon, it's heading toward its conjunction with Saturn, a bit of a reality check. This is Boxing Day, celebrated in many parts of the world, not so much in the United States. But then the moon will, by the end of the day, make its conjunction with Neptune, and the moon will move from Pisces into Aries just moments after the new day, December 27th, begins. It does it at 12:01 a.m. on the 27th. But here on the 26th, we can still see that the moon is still in Pisces, heading towards its conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. We can move this ahead to the 27th. And on the 27th, now we can see that Mercury exact trine with Chiron. Mercury has moved also through its exact quincunx with Pluto, with Jupiter. And once again, we have that triangle with a square, a trine, and a quincunx. Jupiter square here, Jupiter square to Chiron. That was exact on the 21st, but it's still, I mean, within Jupiter square to Chiron is still within 3/4 of a degree, less than a degree of exact. While at the same time, today we have Mercury's trine to Chiron at noon is about 1/4 of a degree from exact, and Mercury's quincunx to Jupiter is less than 1/2 a degree, all at noon today, saying that there's flow and blockage and opportunity to learn. That is all on the 27th. We have a bit more energy now, perhaps with the moon in Aries. As we move to the 28th, there's no exact aspects. We can see the moon now catching up with Chiron and Eris making a trine also to Mercury. Communication may be extended here, but remember that moon is also making a square to Jupiter because it's just reactivating that triangle. Some people call it a learning triangle with the trine square and quincunx up to Mercury, and the moon is kind of running through that energy today on the 28th. As we get to the 29th, we can see, first of all, that the moon will move into Taurus at 3:57 a.m. on the 29th. And we actually end the year with the moon in Gemini. It will move into Gemini on Wednesday, but today, on Monday, the 29th, the moon stabilizes our energy a bit in Taurus. That moon in Taurus really kind of brings us down to the ground and kind of helps us think about what we're doing. And oh, I actually got a mosquito that time. Actually helps us think about what we're doing and where we're going and how we're going to get there. Mercury makes its exact trine with Eris today. I think we have a bit of flow of energy here as long as we speak the truth. Why do I say that? Because Mercury is squaring Saturn later in the evening on the 29th. And when Mercury squares Saturn, we need to be aware of what reality is and not push our boundaries beyond it. Today's not a day for dreams and imagination. It's a day to keep it real and to keep conversations grounded as Mercury makes its square to Saturn. That's on the 29th. On the 30th, we can see that the moon is still moving through Taurus, heading towards its conjunction with Uranus. Mercury is now just past its exact square with Saturn, heading towards its square with Neptune, and it won't get to that square until the beginning of next year, which is now only 2 days away. But here on the 30th, we also have not only the moon moving through grounded Taurus, but we also have Mars and Mercury moving toward complicated aspects with Uranus, which is where we end the month. And here at noon on the last day of 2025, we can see that the moon is at 4 degrees of Gemini. The moon actually entered Gemini this morning at 5:13 a.m., kind of pumping up the energy. We have a little bit of excitement. We have a little bit of curiosity. We have a little bit of movement early this morning. Also, as the moon moves into Gemini, it conjoins with Uranus. And that conjunction with Uranus can actually stir up ideal. I'm being interrupted by a saw of some sort in the background. The moon conjunct Uranus can stir up some excitement, some innovation, some things that don't naturally fit into the rest of everything else. But there is some energy here at the end of the year. But that Uranus is not only being stirred up by the moon, on December 31st, we also have Mercury making a quincunx with Uranus as Mars makes a square and a half. What does this mean? It means Uranus is in the high focus of, oh my God, what the heck's going on? But the fact is that this last day has a bit of shake, rattle, and roll to it. I don't necessarily mean earthquakes, but there can be some life quakes that are tied to this energy that start the year off with a bit of a oomph and a bang. And I find it interesting that I'm talking about Uranus. I don't know if you can hear this. It's not a chainsaw. It sounds like some sort of tool that's doing grinding on metal or something. And it just feels fitting that we end this with these Uranus transits, the moon's conjunct to Uranus, and Mercury and Mars's quincunx and sesqui-square. And with that, we're going to end the not only the month, but the year. And I look forward to next year. I hope that you all have a wonderful, as good as one can have, holiday season, whatever spiritual, metaphysical, religious holidays, traditional holidays you may choose to celebrate. I hope that this is a meaningful time of year for you, as we say on one level, out with the old, in with the new, as we think cosmically and act locally. Let's aim our love, our compassion, and our kindness to those around us the best we can. With that, peace be with all of you through these difficult times here on planet Earth. And I'll see you all for January of 2026. And I will see those of you who are Patreon subscribers at the middle of the month. And until then, be safe, be well, peace out. Rick Levine.